morning, everyone. Welcome to the next session of our TeTra seminar. Our speaker today is Serena Causo. She is a PhD student at Ghent University in the ERC project Everyday Writing in Greco-Roman and Late Antique Egypt, led by Professor Klaas Bentijn at Ghent University. Within the context of this project, she studies the material aspects of legal and documentary papyri from Roman and Late Antique Oxyrhynchus. Before coming to Ghent in 2019, she received her master's in classics from the University of Salento in 2016 with a dissertation on the socioeconomic role of the Julio-Claudian Usii. She was a research assistant at the Papyrological Institute of Leiden and a research member of an SNSF project on the re-edition of papyri from the Basel Papyrus collection. She was also awarded a Startstipendium at the Institute of Ancient History at the Department of Classical Civilizations at the University of Basel for the investigation of the changes of the irrigation system in Egypt during the 3rd century. And today she'll be speaking to us about her research into the legal and documentary papyri from late antique Egypt. Serena, the floor is yours.
You're still muted.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I was saying that I'm trying to share my screen now, but yeah, it's possible. So right. Can you just tell me if you can see the presentation well?
We still see your document.
Oh, you see my document, okay.
Not yet in slide mode. Now
Okay.
it's in slide mode.
Right.
Yep.
Okay. So first of all, I would like to, of course, thank the organizers for inviting me and in general for organizing this very nice series of lectures that about which I particularly like the scope of the text transmission, and I tried to focus a little bit on that from my perspective, which is the perspective of a documentary text. So I ask myself, how would transmission, like what is an example of transmission within the administrative, for example, the administrative or the legal context that we observe in documentary papyri. So I thought about attachments, which are like it is a topic that I touched very transversely during my my PhD thesis. So I will start without further ado. I wanted to start with just like a very brief description of this papyrus that I chose to open the presentation. That is pretty special. It's a portion of a roll, just unfortunately the only surviving portion of a roll that contains an illustrated novel. Now, this is, it's not very common in papyri to find illustrated text. And in this case, it is particularly interesting because, so the text is a novel. The novel has not been published yet, but some scholars have been already focusing on the illustration, and they have interpreted the one that you see here in the center as a hearing, a court hearing, where the man sitting very comfortably on this chair that looks like a throne is in fact the strategos. The strategos was a pretty important figure within the administrative context in Egypt, because he was a sort of intermediary figure between the local administration and the central government, so the prefect. And these two men that are standing there in front of him, they were probably there to ask probably, I don't know, a resolution about a dispute. Now, the fact that people could appear in court and resolve resolutions through court hearings is, of course, very normal. Was very normal in Roman Egypt as it is normal now. But this was a process, of course, that required like a procedure, and the procedure always started with a petition. And petitions were very, very powerful instruments in the hand of the population of the Roman Empire. Not just citizens, but also provincials could apply, could send an application, send a petition to the authorities asking for intervention, resolutions of some problems, just to take action in administrative or legal context when it was needed from them. And the fact that petitions were so popular and so common, it is shown somehow by the large quantity of petition that we have in the papyrological documentation. So just to give you a very rough idea, in the first 3 centuries of the Roman rule, so from the 1st until the end of the 3rd century AD, we have more than 1,000 papyri published. So, and that is only, of course, from Egypt. The reality is that this is probably just a very pale shadow of the real number of petitions that were submitted every day, because we have actually documents in which we have like actual figures. And one of these documents, I forgot to put it in the presentation, I realize now, it is very famous. It is a circular, like an edict, like a copy of an edict from the prefect, in which he says that during his last visit to the Arsinoid Nome, so just a district in Egypt, he had received 1,084 petitions in one single day. And this is just one official. So if we think about the fact that every level of the administrative hierarchy, every official could be petitioned. So starting from the local level, the archephodos or the ekatontarches that were like police officers, going to the strategos, the epistrategos, the prefect, up to the emperor. All these officials could receive petitions. So we have like a general idea of how important were petitions in the administrative context. Now, the content of petitions could vary as well. Of course, we have very let's say the basic structure of the petition is always the same. I show you like a very simple petition, how it is structured. We always have a prescriptum that includes the addressee that is always in first position. So it is like a position of reverence, of course, and then it is followed by the sender, so the petitioner. Then we have the narratio, that is really the body of the document, in which the reasons for petitioning are presenting. Then there is the supplicatio, where the actual request is brought forward, the date, and the signature. Around the beginning of the 2nd century, however, petitions starts to be a bit more, let's say, not complex, but a bit more spiced up, because new rhetorical aspects starts to come up, and scribes starts to enhance petition with rhetorical elements that mostly happen in petitions that are addressed to the higher officials. So in these cases, the narratio starts to be prefaced by what is called exordium or proemium. That is, in fact, a very rhetorical part in which the petitioner praises the goodwill of the official, or it gives like a sort of introduction to the narratio, to the story behind the petition, in order to capture his attention, in order to capture his benevolence, and somehow also touch the strings of his heart. Like we see in this case, for example, there is a woman, Thermution, who has petitioned the strategos, and she is worried about the health of her young slave because she had an accident and she is risking her life. So we read that she says, I loved and cared for my little maidservant. I treated as a little daughter in hope that when she came of age, she would tend to me because I'm a woman helpless and alone. So all of these rhetorical things starts to come up. They, of course, are aimed to help the petitioner in order to achieve the results that he aimed to with the petition. But besides of the rhetorical, like next to a good rhetoric, also what might help very much the petitioner is the use of supporting documents for his petition. So when I say supporting documents, I mean additional documents added to the petition as attachments. Now, we find very many different types of attachments that can be, in fact, attached to petitions. We find, for example, contracts attached to petitions when, for example, the plaintiff is about a recovery of a debt, for example. We find declarations in case in which, I don't know, like someone is complaining because of a clerical mistake. But especially, we find, very importantly, we find legal sources attached to petitions. And legal sources are, of course, of particular interest for us. And they were of particular interest for the petitioner because they gave some legal standing to his request. So as I was telling you, in the framework of my dissertation, I have researched a little bit about attachment, but mainly with an eye to the material aspect, because I wanted to understand how a scribe would handle the process of putting together two different types of text. And before, I want to go a bit more into attachments to just give you an idea of what it means, because it's, let's say, the idea that we have about attachment is very different from what an attachment was in antiquity. Somehow, not very different, but yeah, somehow it is different because while in modern times, for example, we perceive the attachment as a self-standing, independent document separated from the main text. For example, I don't know, if we are sending an email, the attachment is always a different file. If we are sending a paper document, which is rare today, we staple it probably. We make a copy and we staple it. In the past, actually, it seems that the tendency was actually the opposite. So the scribe would try in every way to squeeze the attachment, to keep the attachments together with the main text in the same sheet as much as possible. And this was not casual, it was really purposeful, it was really a choice by the scribe. And this is particularly true in the administration. And it is a choice that comes from two main considerations, probably two advantages that were found in order to keep this document together. One of them was the fact that related documents could be kept in that way in one single place, and they could be retrieved all together when needed. And the second reason is that when documents were kept together, they were less liable to be dismembered or to be lost when they were transferred or when they were archived as well. Now, we have to imagine that a scribe had to deal with these two different documents and to arrange them together in the space of one single sheet. So my question was, how did he do it? And to which extent he considered necessary to visually distinguish these two documents that he put together. So I collected some material, and as it happens, the documentation shows that there are many ways in which this attachment can be performed. But even within several different ways, there is a consistency within the documentation. So these different ways recur more often. So I just show you some of them. You will see them in blue, always in blue in the image. So we see that the scribe can decide to leave no separation at all. Here we have a contract of loan that is attached to an application for a registration of a loan, and there is no difference whatsoever, like no space whatsoever. So it's just like the text is just a continuum. Another case is the one in which the scribe can leave a small space between the main text and the attachment, is what we call vacants. So you can see it here. Between the again for the application of registration of another sale and the contract of sale, he could decide to leave one line, so an interlinear space, or it could use some layout features, like in this case, use what we call aesthesis. It is like an indentation between here. In this case, it's a petition and a court proceeding attached. He could also use some introductory small locution, like in this case, he used std, that means there it is, like I'm introducing you the attachment. Or he could then also go to proper distinction between the two texts. Like in this case, we find them in 2 columns. So the attachment is the one on the second column again. And we can see that also somehow the format of the original document might have been retained, because the format of the 2 documents, as you can see, is not the same, it's different. Another, but a bit more rare case is the fact that attachments were left on a separate sheet. And of course, in these cases, we have the main document that refers to the attachment, but we don't have the attachment. So actually, somehow the scribes were right when they decided to keep them together on the same sheet. But how do we know that there is an attachment? Because the verb that is used to refer to the document. So sorry, how do we know that the attachment is on another sheet? The verb that is used, for example, in this case, is synzeognomy. That means yoke together, couple. When usually the verb that we always find when when the main text and the attachment are on the same sheet is always eupokemai or eupotasso or eupotitemi. That means subjoin, append below. So also the language, of course, somehow is an instrument that a scribe can use in order to organize the material within the sheet and to give references to how the material is organized. Now, going back to petitions and attachments, when I did this short research about attachments in documentary text, I actually found out that petitions these are the blue ones. So the green is like miscellaneous documents. The petitions are, in fact, the documents that have a highest rate of attachments. And that is pretty normal, right? If we consider that they are somehow like a pre-legal document, it is obvious that they would use supporting documents in order to give, like a standing or a power or some reinforcement to their request. What is also interesting is the type of documents that are attached to petitions. The most recurrent one are actually legal proceedings and imperial rescripts. So I'm going to focus today on these 2, again, from the point of view of how the attachments, how they were attached to petitions. So the first one is that of legal proceedings. Just to give you an idea of what legal proceedings were, we also call them court records. They are minutes from actual court hearings. So in some cases, during every court hearing, everything was recorded. The outcome, the judgment coming out of a court hearing could be used as a precedent for other cases. So people that were petitioning about topics that were similar to those that were already that had been already submitted to authorities could use the legal proceeding as a precedent for their own case. So we see again that the attachment is attached below. It follows the main document. Here as well, in this case, we saw this before, we have a petition on top and the legal proceeding below. This is always the case with legal proceedings. The other type of legal source that we find attached, as I told you, is imperial rescript. And they are particularly, in order to talk about legal imperial rescript in Egypt, we have to talk about the moment in which, the Severus and Caracalla visited Egypt in 199-200. That was a moment in which they their visit prompted a very high number of petitions addressed to them. So a high number of legal judgments were released by them. As a result, we see a surge in the number of petitions that contain imperial rescripts, because of course, nothing could have a legal force more than a judgment given by the emperor himself. So we have really very many petitions with imperial rescripts from Severus and Caracalla. But these documents have a very special layout that differs very much from the layout that we have seen so far for documents that have an attachment. So this is the first case that I present to you. We have the portion of the text that I circled in red that is the petition. So it starts here: to Aurelius Leonidas, strategos of the Oxyrhynchide Nome, from Aurelius Heraclides, and then the petition starts. What we see above, however, is very interesting. This is the imperial rescript. Here we read the deified Severus and Antoninus tu capito son of Hermophantus. If, as you claim, you say that your property, because of the burden of the liturgy, it stands to reason that the cession is not made to our treasury, but to the person who nominated you to the liturgy. So basically, this is a judgment about a case in which a person doesn't want to take the liturgy upon himself. Liturgies were compulsory services. So if a person didn't want to take a liturgy on himself, he could cede part of his property to the person that would take the liturgy in his place. So this was a rescript from Severus and Caracalla, and as you can see, is not attached below, but it is prefaced to the main document. And this is the case as well for this other document, which is again a petition with exactly the same intent and with exactly the same rescript, but from another person. And in this case as well, the main document is below and the attachment is above. Here we have again another petition to the prefect of Egypt, to which one rescript from the emperor is attached. But in this case, as you can see, while here and here the rescript is also quite long, you know, it's not very long, but it has like some sort of legal it is somehow well structured. In this case, we see that the rescript is just these few lines. Unfortunately, it's even damaged, but even if it was complete, it would be just these few lines. So if you prove that you have been, we don't know, the ruler of the province will take care that you are released from the second one. So this very somehow lapidary character of the imperial rescript can surprise us somehow, but it is indeed very normal. It is actually quite common for imperial rescript to be that lapidary, that short. And we have a very special document that is a copy of imperial rescripta. Now I just brought 5 here. I don't know why you cannot see all of them. But anyway, there were in this document only there were more than 15, I believe, and they are copies of these small rescripts, one after the other. So you see how short they are. Like this one, for example, just say to the Aureli, Artemidoros, and Danubion and others, comply with the opinions rendered. So this was the judgment of the emperors, that quick, that short, and that dry somehow. Now, when I started to look at these documents and at the fact that, the attachment was always prefaced and that rescripta were so common during the Severan dynasty, I somehow interpreted the phenomenon as something that was strictly connected to the Severan period. So we know that the Severans had a very active legislative they had a very strong legislative activity. We know that, for example, only Severus in his 18 years of reign released around 400 rescripts. So they really had this strong will about being involved in the general legislative process of the empire. However, after initially believing that actually, somehow the abundance of rescripts and the fact that these rescripts were put in a predominant place at the beginning of the petition was somehow connected to some administrative reform that the Severan brought up. In reality, afterwards, I started to look at inscriptions. And I realized that the same procedure of putting imperial orders or imperial edicts or other type of imperial sayings before the main text in epigraphy is quite common. So, for example, in this case, we don't have the inscription is broken. We don't have the initial portion, but we read here that the legis Adriane is superscriptum, so it was written above. In this case, we see an extract from a letter of Pertinax, and again, the letter is prefaced to the main text. In this case, again, this is a collection of several documents concerning some military misbehavior, and it's a miscellaneous type of collection, but the imperial rescript is put in first place. And here we have actually an imperial subscription that was the reply to a petition that is, so the petition is within the frame of the stele, and the subscription is written above, as you can see here. We have the same in petition, in some petition as well. Like in this case, the petition is written before, and the reply of the emperor comes above. So in the end, what I want to say is that these general surveys allow us to contextualize the peculiar scribal practices and to understand better its connection to papyri, that we wouldn't understand also without the help of inscriptions. So the phenomenon allows us to recognize that a certain hierarchy in legal sources was actually established, and ça va sans dire that imperial legislation were on the highest rank. And even when they did not express complex legal concepts, nor propose definitive solutions, they were still above the rest. In addition, we must take into account that the choice of prefacing an imperial decision to a petition also responded to precise rhetorical goals, by which the receiver of the petition, who read the decision of the emperor, was probably put in a more submissive position and felt even more compelled to take seriously the request and to comply with it. And that's it. Sorry if I took a bit longer, but thanks for your patience. So I stopped sharing. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you very much. It was a very, very interesting paper. I'm sure people will jump in with various questions. I'm happy to throw in first one.
Yeah.
What's the relationship? So I've noticed that you've showed one of the last examples is a collection of these sort of rescriptions of legal text. What would they, for individual documents, what would they have worked with? This sort of collection of excerpts from the legal text, or would they have the full-blown legal text next to them to make their rescripts?
Yeah, that's a good question. Actually, when I started to organize I had to leave out many things from the presentation. One of these was how rescripts came to be, actually, how they were presented in their original form, and also how they were delivered to the petitioner, right? Because this is also a question. So what we see in the document that you mentioned is actually just the reply to a petition. In the Severus period already, so at the beginning when a petitioner was sending a petition, he always had to present it in person, either himself or through an intermediary. And in that case, he received as well the reply to the petition in person. Later on, they started to post publicly the reply. So if the person wanted to read the reply, he had to go physically to the place in which the petition was posted, which usually was like a public place, and copied. And we have examples of actually replies that have been copied. Now, this is even more complicated with the emperor, because either he posted the replies in Alexandria, so people have to, get there and have the reply, or sometimes they post them in the main metropolis in the districts. But what we know is that they were posted. So the document that you saw there is probably just a copy that someone made when he went there to collect these subscriptions. Now, the point is, who did it? It might be like a clerk working in a lawyer office, because these things had legal value. So for a lawyer, it was of course very important to know which kind of decision were given. But then the question is, how do you know the relevance of a reply if you don't know the text of the petition? So yeah, there are a lot of debates about actually this type of subscripciones. Actually, there are always questions. There are also questions about the fact that what we call subscripciones, and we think that where replies to petition are in fact responses that were given in person during a hearing, so during a court hearing. This is why they are so short, and so yeah, it is not really. I'm not really sure about the exact procedure. I think that there is no certainty, actually. Yeah.
Of course, yeah. Very interesting. Thank you. I think Georgia has the next question.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Serena, for this fascinating presentation. It was really informative. I have several questions, but I'd like to start with something that you say at the very beginning of the presentation. You mentioned that there was a change in the way this papyri were built, and you mentioned the exordium. That this change happens around the 2nd century, if I got you correctly.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you whether you could notice some formularity in this exordia, if they had like the same rhetorical like layout. And why do you think the 2nd century?
Yeah, so yeah, the question is I'm very happy about the questions, because there are so many things I wanted to say and I didn't have the chance. So during the 2nd century, I mean, we start to see a tendency towards a more complex, like a more structured petition. But it's not that all petitions start to be more rhetorical, or they start to be like, some of them stay very simple. It also depends very much on the content of the petition, right? Like if, like we have many petitions that are about just like, I don't know, like a thievery or a aggression, or like the theft of one horse, for example. So you really don't need a lot of rhetorical work behind that. But what is the main reason that is put forward for this change is the fact that around the 2nd century, the 2nd sophistic starts to be much more en vogue, let's say. So scribes, that were the one that wrote petitions, they started to receive rhetorical education as well. So they were able, when writing a petition, to put their rhetorical instinct, let's say, into these documents as well. But this is just one of the, one of the possibilities. Maybe it's just like some stylistic change. Actually, what I'm thinking, I mean, this is really like an hypothesis, and I bring it forward as for what it is. But while I look at petition, I see that, you know, in time they start to become more and more also, can I say, you can see that who writes them becomes more and more competent on a legal level. So what I wonder is if at some point, you know, lawyers or people work, like the people in charge of writing petition were maybe very close to the legal sphere. So they were not like scribes, like simple clerks, but they start to become more and more close to the legal environment, let's say, the legal milieu. So the rhetoric, of course, changes also because these people are experts in the field. And we know for sure that some petitions were written by lawyers because they have a highly specialized content, you know, like a very structured legal content that could be handled just by lawyers, let's say. But yeah, these are the two things that I would put forward the most.
Very interesting. I'm curious about how the state of the data is. How did we find these petitions? Is it disparate papyri found in here and there all over the place, or do we have archives of petitions, of documents like that are gathered in one place, same scribe or same notary or something like that? Do we have drafts, for instance?
The archive would be like an archive of petition would be a dream. We have some archives in which we find more than one petition, but we don't have like proper archives. Only with that would be really a dream. We have drafts, actually. It is very interesting to see. We have cases in which, for example, 3 or 4 drafts of the same petition or 4 drafts of the same petition are found. So in that case, you really see like the first draft is just notes, you know, like notes with numbers and like very quick, words that, you know, gave them. Probably what happened is that the person that had to write a petition went to someone expert in writing a petition, and was just giving like some, general information. And then we see how the petition grows and how things are either inserted or changed until the final version, that is the one that was possibly then submitted. But you have the chance to, in few occasions, but you have the chance to follow somehow this through the draft, how a petition was actually built. That is very interesting as well. Then we have like very uninformative drafts that are just, documents that at some point have been just left in half and never continued. Or usually we recognize them as draft because they don't have the addressee.
Mm-hmm.
So probably they were never sent somehow. This is the
very, very interesting. And those that you say that we have successive drafts of a petition, how did they survive? Together? Are they on the same sheet, or are they? Because if they survive on different sheets and together, that's an archive by broad definition. How did they survive?
Yeah, this particular case, they survived together. So they were found together. Actually, they were found like one on top of the other. Maybe I don't remember if they were still rolled, but they were found together. That is
very interesting.
Yeah, it is awesome. Yeah, and sometimes we also have cases that are very interesting about petitions. And so we know that they were written in duplicates. So more than one petition was written next to each other, because they had to be sent either to different officials in some cases, or to the same official but in different copies, because then one copy had to go in the archive, the other copy had to stay maybe with the official, another copy had to be transmitted to another official if some communication was ongoing. So we know that several duplicates were written, and in some cases we have like 3 or 4 duplicates that are still found together.
Very interesting.
Yeah, it's really very, very open universe. It's really interesting to discover.
I think Georgia has the next question.
Yeah, thank you. It's just a small one to check that I fully understand what you presented us. So it's not possible to find a correlation between the layout of the attachment and the content of the petition, right? It depends on what the scribe wanted to. There's no link to the kind of official it would send to, or the content itself, right?
So I actually tried when I collected the documents, I tried to see more or less if there was some sort of connection. There might be different aspects and that at interplay, it could be, for example, like, I don't know, that if a document is just a copy, it would be written just very fast, without keeping attention to the original layout. Maybe in the original layout, there was a separation, but the scribe had just, it just needed to copy it, so it didn't pay attention to that. Or, for example, in the case where I show you that the attachment was on a separate sheet, the original, like the main document, is actually a document that comes from the High Chancery. So, maybe the Chancery was used to send attachments in different sheets. It didn't follow like the, let's say, low administrative practice of trying to cramp everything on one sheet. The Chancery, the prefect had a lot of papyrus, and he could spare, like one sheet more. But the problem is that most of the documents are broken, so we're never really sure about their nature, the real nature, so it is difficult to link very well the form to the nature of the document, let's say. So it's a bit more complicated.
Yeah, thank you. I see. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Professor Shirinian?
Yeah. Yeah, I also want to thank you, Serena, and not only you, all of you, because, you know, I'm sorry to say something out of the context, but now when I'm so disappointed in mankind because of these all wars and this wildness, to have your sessions, it's kind of spiritual outlet. So I really thank all of you. And sometimes it's amazing you can, for example, this angelic girl to deal with such a sophisticated matter. So it gives you hope that not everything is lost in this world. Anyway, my question is about actually continuation of your question, and you're speaking about archive. I want to know if there were sort of templates, meaning that, you know, as nowadays we have in notarial offices the same cases, and they have kind of templates. It's kind of, you said we have we have double papyruses, but do you think that they were templates which need only to be added or fulfilled in this case, because the cases are thief or killing or something? So do you find such a thing or no?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I also take the advantage to thank again the organizers, since you brought it up. And I was telling them privately that it's very, very nice also the fact that they record everything, and, you know, it's easily accessible afterwards. And I had really like a lot of good time watching the presentation that you can find on the YouTube channel. But yeah, aside from that, there are, so as far as I know, there are no real templates for petitions. So there were not like pre-prepared petitions that just had to be filled in. They had somehow some formularies. So we find somehow, you know, like formulaic sentences that could be then used to write a petition, like sort of guides, you know, guidelines. Or we find, as I was saying before, these collections of precedents, like collections of precedent cases, or in this case, like collection of rescripta. So sort of manual from which they could take legal informations. But the templates, actually, at least I couldn't find them for papyri, for petitions. But there are in the papyrological documentation other types of document that are templates, in fact, where you can see that some spaces are left blank in order to be filled in. But they are usually much more formulaic than petition. They are like declarations, or mostly declarations that were really strict and standardized in the language. Petition have like a more, let's say, personal to them. You know, they are more related to the case that is presented. But yeah, otherwise you find not pre-filled, but documents to be filled in other contexts.
Thank you. We have several more questions. Andy first, please.
Thank you very much. Fascinating talk about material I know nothing about. I was wondering, going back to this issue of these rhetorical additions and this exordium that's added, how much of it is scribes and petitioners trying to draw attention to their petition in what you've clearly shown is a huge pool of petitions, like hundreds and thousands. And do we have any other evidence of this kind of competition between these petitions? Is there any other indications from within some petitions where you can clearly see that some haven't been answered at all, or there are delays or that kind of thing? Is that happening as well?
Yes. Yeah. That's very interesting. I was very interested to learn that actually petition could be completely ignored by officials. So in some cases, you see that then petitioners try to petition again, maybe a higher official, and they say, I have petitioned that official and he has not replied to me. So they totally had the chance to dismiss a case as well. And we find as well in rescripts sometimes, I mean, there is a reply, but it says your case is cannot be, we cannot proceed with your case. So somehow like what I was telling you at the beginning, the rhetoric and the attachments were all, like tools that they try to use to make a petition more appealing and more successful, let's say. So yeah, it is the case. It is really like that. They could be ignored completely.
Very, very interesting. We have a question from Armine, who cannot read it herself, so I will. Thank you very much. Are there cases and or any documents where the petitioner disagreed with the decision, or so reappealing, or did they have the right to disagree at all, or resend the request?
Yes, they did. They could. Yeah, as I was saying, they could send it to another official, both in the case in which it was not answered, and in a few cases also when they didn't receive the attention that they deserve, or they didn't obtain what they did want. It's not, I mean, you don't find it very commonly. Also because, I mean, petitioning was somehow also it entailed with some costs as well. And in order to write like several copies of a petition, you had to pay, of course, for the scribe who wrote it. And probably also this process of getting someone that brings a petition and someone else that brings back the reply. There is a sort of, let's say, mechanism that maybe it was not accessible to everyone. And also, of course, it depends on the gravity of the case. So if someone, like there is, for example, a case in which a man is left by his wife who cheated on him, and when she left the house, she also brought some of his belonging with her. So he was very upset, of course. And he sent an email to the strategos and he said, oh, my wife left me, even if I always treated her well. But we have to see that. Then she gives a list of the items. So, and they are, I don't know, like one, like a tunic or a knife. So they are, pretty common things that of course were of some value for them, but probably these men would have never brought again the case to a higher official if he hadn't been heard. But then there are cases in which people have to recover a debt, and maybe a debt is very, very high, and you want to actually somehow decide if you want, like how far you bring a case. But yeah, in general, I would say that there are a few cases in which it happens that they, I don't know if they disagreed. I cannot think about like specific cases, but for sure they had the chance to repropose the petition.
Very, very interesting. I know Valentina also cannot speak, but she has a question in the chat for, I think it's only to me. Thanks very much for the very interesting talk. a question on gender. What is the proportion of women's petitions that we find? How different are they from those of men? I found your example on the little servant and the old woman particularly fascinating.
Mm-hmm. I am so sorry, but I cannot, I don't know how to answer to this question because I didn't really look into it. There are studies about women and petitions, also studies about the language of petitions written by women, as far as, you know, this can actually be an indicator, seeing that, you know, petitions were always written by scribes anyway. But, you know, there is always this interest about what women write, not only for petitions, but also for letters and other types of documents. But unfortunately, I'm not able to really reply like with a good answer. I'm sorry, but for sure, I mean, I can mention some petitions that came from women, but yeah, I don't have like a real idea of how the situation was.
Professor Shirinian?
Sorry again. Hey, Valentina's question brought another question for me. Are there any petitions that are written by servants?
Yeah, I actually wanted to say that during the presentation, and then I left it out. Everyone could petition as long as it was a free man. So like men, women, freedmen as well, but slaves were actually considered as objects. Like they were property, not objects. They were property of the owner. So they were not, I think, I'm not super sure, but I think they were not allowed to petition. Also because I think in that case we would have a fair amount of petitions from mistreated servants. But I'm not completely sure. I mean, this comes from what I know about the legal and administrative system of the empire. I mean, yeah, as I said, like provincials could petition without any difference with citizens. But yeah, I don't think servants were allowed.
There are some epigraphic documents that written by servants or slaves. That's why I'm asking. In Armenia, for example, we have, and it is very interesting for me. If
and they are petitions as well?
No petition. There is a inscription in terms from the slaves who work it in the baths and they haven't been paid.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to stress that. I mean, I'm not 100% sure that there are none, but I didn't find any so far.
I also have a question. The migration of the elements in a petition, having the rescription here or there or whatever that you've described, is it always a matter, I don't know, maybe you thought of it already or not, but I'm curious, so I'll ask.
Go ahead.
Is it just a matter of convention? At some point in time, they would do it in that way, and in some other point in time, they do it the other way around? Or is it possible to trace a reason in the migration of elements, like in the rhetoric of the petition itself?
Mm-hmm.
You know, shuffling that around it. I don't know.
Yeah, I think a little bit of both. You know, somehow there was in every period a sort of style, let's say. And then, yeah, probably, as I was saying, like something contributed to additions, but there are never real changes. Like the structure always stays the same. We call exordium narration, whatever, like we give a name because we see like these recurrent features and we need to give a structure. But yeah, I think for them was just really like, you know, a sort of formulary instinct that they had. So when they started to add what we call exordium before the narration, they didn't plan it. They just, you know, they just saw fit that a sort of captatio benevolentiae would precede the explanation of the facts. And actually in the text that I show you also, there is another sort of PT speech right after the narratio. So it is maybe not as strict as we describe it, but let's say the structure is always recurring. Let's say it's always consistent. Okay,
thank you very much. Andy?
Yeah, I wanted to continue on something that Professor Serena brought up, and that is the sort of the socioeconomic context of these petitions. Do we actually have an idea of how much it would cost to petition to write such a petition? Because you would need to have papyrus, you would need to have someone to write it. So presumably, even as a freeman, that would have been quite expensive. Or do we have an idea of the cost of that in any? I mean, in this period or in any period?
Yes, we do have. So, yeah, we don't know exactly how much it costed. Somehow, okay. No, let me rephrase it. So, at some point, petitions. We know in the Fayum, which is an area of Egypt, like a region of Egypt. We know that there were what they were called grapheia. They were sort of writing offices. Now, these writing offices had like daily registers of what they had written, and they recorded everything. So they recorded the type of document, and they recorded the price of the document as well. But this is pretty specific for contracts, because they had to record everything and send it to the administration. While for other documents, such as petitions, they're a bit more, let's say, not really caring. So they, for example, they just write eupomnema, which is one of the names with which usually they refer to petitions. But with eupomnema, you can also refer to declarations, for example, or applications or other types of documents, or even like just memoranda, just notes. So it is not really sure when the word eupomnema corresponds to the petition, like to a proper petition. But in that case, we have a vague idea of how much a petition, if that is a petition, how much it would cost. And usually the price is not very high. It's like 1 drachma or 2 drachmas. Now, I didn't do a study, like a social economic study that far, because yeah, that would entail to see in which century it was paid and how much was 1 drachma in that period compared to other documents. And I didn't do that myself. So I don't have that in mind right now, but I think the cost was somehow bearable, because we see people petitioning for many small reasons. Although it has been assumed that the people that petition were already like, let's say, not really lower class, like, you know, low, just, you know, a little bit medium class. So people that, because we always have to keep in mind that the tendency in the past, as it is today as well, was always to try to do like a pacific resolution of conflicts. So the first attempt was always to keep things informal, let's say. And that, I think, was the case in the lowest strata of the society. But yeah, unfortunately, I don't have a precise answer.
We'll have 2 more questions. just to finish off nicely. One is from Luis, who also can't speak, so I'll read it. When drafts are available, is the script the same from one draft to another? And the hand too, or are different people at work at different moments?
With the drafts?
The drafts, yes, that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah. So it's two questions, but sorry, I'm not following.
Yeah, the question is,
right.
the script is the same, or you have several hands working on the same draft?
Yeah. So in that example that I recalled before, it seems to be always the same hand, I think.
Makes sense.
Yeah, but even then, even there, however, it's not always very like straightforward, because sometimes, you know, a person could write with different styles according to how fast he or she was writing.
The level of panic.
Yeah, yeah, the level of panic, and also the level of somehow accuracy that you want to give. Like, so the final version would be written much better than the first draft, let's say. But yeah, in general, when we have it, we can see it. We also have cases, actually, if I'm not mistaken, I recall a case in which the hand doesn't seem the same. But then again, like sometimes I myself write in very different styles. So it is, yeah, with paleography, it's quite hard to be very precise, let's say.
Especially in documentary papyri, yeah.
Yeah, but like in the duplicates, for example, you see very often, like you see exactly the same hand that repeated the documents several times.
And to close in, I have a question about the imperial rescripts, so the legal text in your petition, whatever was taken as a legal text proof. In as much as it overlaps from one petition to another and other documents, inscription or whatnot, how stable is that text? Did people, if you manage to do that sort of comparison of legal texts across petitions and other sources, how stable is? Did they use it to the letter, or did they tweak it every now and again, the imperial rescriptum for their own case?
Yeah, very nice question. They did not follow it very strictly. So we have, they didn't twist it, but it's not always repeated exactly with the same wording. But that was, I think, very, very common in every type of document. Like sometimes we have duplicates that are different from each other. Like some words are changing. But here there is a much bigger issue that we should open, and I try to avoid it for the presentation, is the fact that usually, as far as we know, imperial rescripta, so what in Latin is called subscriptiones, were in Latin. And what we have in the sources is Greek. So there is a much bigger issue of method here. So are we talking about translations, or are we talking about something that we don't know, that is actually there were subscription written in Greek? So I tried to it's not very well investigated as a topic, let's say, because it entails with bilingualism and like translation issues. But so one of the hypotheses is that actually, if an emperor would release a subscriptio while he was in Rome, he would do it in Latin. And that if he would do it when he was in the province, he would maybe do it in the language of the province. But that is really just like one of the hypotheses that I have read around. And it is like I have no instrument to actually be certain about that. But I think this issue, you know, if there is a translation or not, it has also to do with the fact that the document, when they are repeated, are not exactly the same, because we don't know if, you know, there was like one official translation, if there was one, or if people have to do with the Latin one and they translated it themselves, which I doubted, because it is still an official document, so it needs to have some sort of validity or authentication. But yeah, I think it's a larger problematic. But tendentially, let's say the content is the same. Some wording can change.
Thank you. So overall, very, very stable sort of thingy, despite some details.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. And I'm sure everyone will join me in thanking our speaker today for an excellent presentation of a very interesting subject. And thanks everyone for joining in. And we look forward to seeing you the next time.
Thank you for bearing with me.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Have a good day.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.